Okay, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. This is really exciting for me because I know the audience will, it to certain members of the audience, this is going to be very relevant. So I titled it just Neural Speech. That's me, and this is at the Brain Foundation annual meeting. Now, our little icon kind of says it all. By the way, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
You can. Okay, great. So there's a little black box, somebody's locked inside, and we get them out of the box using neural signals and translate that into neural speech. So that's a summarized thing. We're done. I can go home now.
I'll do the
Okay,
rest.
you won't let me off the hook. Okay, so the problem is very simple. People who are locked in cannot speak. In addition, they're paralyzed, but nevertheless, they're intelligent and alert. Um, and Sue Me was an example. They spend all day looking at the ceiling tiles and listening to ventilators, and just imagine spending your life doing that. So they need to be able to speak again. And so our mantra is unmute the mute. Um, with speech, they can communicate with their loved ones. They can discuss, argue, feel more human again. They can control a computer to send emails rapidly, go on the internet, control their wheelchairs, run a business. There are 30,000 ALS and about 50,000 brainstem stroke people in the US of A, and about 20 times um, that number in the world. So it's a big issue. And so here's our solution. Um, the electrodes will be implanted in the brain, connected to amplifiers, and then to a computer, which will do the processing and produce the speech. So let me get rid of this on the side. Okay. The neurotrophic electrodes record from the speech cortex, and neural signals are wired to the amplifiers. The amplifiers send the data to the processor, which is essentially a laptop computer that decodes the signals and outputs the signals as speech to the computer speaker. So some people are concerned that if it's silent speech, cannot be decoded. And from the subject ER and myself, we've demonstrated that silent speech can be decoded. So here's a little history. As Shannon said in 1986, conceived the neurotrophic electrode designed to grow the neuropil into the electrode tip. And then in that year, we did our first rat implants and simply deflected their whiskers to evoke the activity. And that's all. And these are all the references in italics. And then in 92, we did the first monkey implant and looked at the movements of the arms that they reached out and grasped. And we looked at the relationship of these movements to the single units. And again, that was reported here, and the FDA on that basis gave us permission to implant humans. So the first human implant, as Shannon said, was in 96, and that was for control of a computer with FDA approval. And that was for communication. And there was a second patient and a third and fourth, but then in 2004, we implanted Eric for speech restoration, and he proved that phonemes and words and phrases could be decoded from brain signals even during silent speech. And I'm going to show you all this. He controlled the cursor with his brain signals. Again, it's a reference. And in 2014, I did implant myself because I had to, two reasons. I had to show that silent speech could be decoded as easily as audible speech, and that they were different from a controlled period of. And also, I wanted the electrode and the electronics to last my lifetime, which unfortunately did not happen because the incision expanded. We had to remove them. So let me talk about the electrodes for just a moment. We call it neurotrophic because we put nerve growth factor in here inside, during implantation in rat, monkey, or human. And so this encourages, as well as the damage to the brain when we insert it, but the nerve growth factor encourages neurons to grow neuroids inside and through the electrode, and they become myelinated. And the histology in rat, monkey, and human shows that there's no scarring, no gliosis, and that's why it persists. And that was even 13 years after implantation in Eric, whose dad is here, and we'll talk about Eric some more. So this is what it looks like. You can see the coil that's there, the coiled wires for strain release, because that's super important. Then there's a little shelf here to stop the surgeon pushing it in too far. And then the tip, and here's the tip. That's the glass, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 wire tips. That's 500 microns. And these wires, 4 wires in this case, are glued to the shelf of glass that's right here. And you get these single units. Well, that's what they look like. And you might wonder, why is some going up, some going down? Well, the amplifiers are plus and minus, they're fixed. And so those myelinated axons close to one wire will depolarize in one direction, the other wire in the other direction. And then we get a whole bunch of them. So let's talk about human recordings. The electrode is implanted in the speech motor control area. Now, I know the speech area is distributed widely, especially in the temporal lobe, but this part is, the neurons there are the last to go down the spinal cord and move my jaw, my tongue, my etc. to make me speak. Anyway, the signals are amplified and then transmitted to an antenna coil. The transmitters, etc., are powered by a power coil, kind of like your toothbrush, and you pop it in the holder and it gets inductively powered. And then the signals, sorry, someone wants to admit. So the signals go to an FM receiver, they go to spike sorter, a decoder, and then speech is synthesized, and there's audio-visual feedback, which is important. So the patient needs to know, yeah, that he's speaking. So this is what the signals look like. There are 2 channels, and you notice these little spikes. Some of them are more or less the same amplitude. And this is what we spike sort. So why do we go to this much trouble? Well, if you record from the EEG, it's low resolution. Surface of the brain is better. Some people invade the brain like we do, and they use multi-signals or continuous signals. But the highest resolution is in the single units. So we go for the highest resolution, even though it's a lot of bother, but it's well worthwhile. So these are what they look like. Some go in one direction, some depolarize in the other direction. They're small, they're maybe 20, 30 microvolts. And we do various tests on to make sure that they are single units, like all the correlations and so on. And some of them fire really slowly. This is 15 seconds. And these are probably the bigger, well, I know they're bigger, and they're probably the corticospinal tract neurons. And then some are very fast, they're probably interneurons. So that's what you get from inside this electrode. You sort it out. So here's a subject list. There's myself, that did it for decoding speech, and Eric. It's 13 years, and he died after 13 years of implantation. And we decoded speech with him. And then I'll talk about JR, who was the first cyborg, and MH Marjorie, who was the first to be implanted, but she did not control the computer, but she did show us that we should continue on. So let me show you her data first. MH, she was almost a complete locked-in syndrome. She had ALF, and she had some eye movements that her husband could interpret, but I couldn't. So here are the signals at day 16 and day 24. There are plenty of signals, large amplitude, small amplitude, etc. And on day 52, we did some baseline recording, and then we asked her to turn the signals on, which she did, then off, then on, off, on, off. When I saw that, I said, wow, this is really going to work. I mean, here's somebody who's locked in. She was intelligent, a very intelligent person. She was in her 50s, and she could turn the signals on and off. So I knew we had something. And then with JR, learning to communicate, we implanted him in 98, and he had a screen with 5 different targets, and he would start the cursor would start here, and he could control it in 2 dimensions, across and down. And the idea was to hit number 4, and you can see it on day 120, 121, and 122. That it took a few trials. These are seconds. How long it took him to reach number 4. So after about trial 5, 6, he did pretty well. So he could learn that. And then we gave him a target, which was 4, which was this one. And we said, okay, I want you to hit it. Well, he didn't do so well at the beginning. Then he did well. He hit it 4 times in a row. And then we stopped. We took a break. And we did it again. And he did fairly well. And we took another break. And then he hit 5 in a row. And then fairly well. He was getting tired. And this was day 243 after implantation. And you can see here, the time it takes to do that was really long at first, but it dropped down to just like 10 seconds or so. And but then as he went on and on the trials, it got worse because he got fatigued. So learn to communicate. So we said, okay, let's learn to spell. So we gave him this screen, simple letters. He could move the cursor across the screen. The cursor went to this, and it flipped back to the beginning. He moved it across and down. His first attempt to spell his own name, John. So he did that. This is day 265. And then he did it 4 times in a few hours, and then he did it. And then on day 266, we said, let's do it again. And he made a real mess of it this time. And then finally, in the 3rd attempt, he made a reasonable spelling. And then said, okay, let's try again. No, he didn't go to J. He went P, H, I, L. He started spelling my name. And then he spelled Kim's name. Then he spelled Melody's name. JR was an independent veteran, and he knew that what he wanted to do, and he wasn't going to take any orders from us. He just said, okay. And then he spelled my name and then John Goldwaite's name. He was a real character. Then on day 423, we had someone new came to the lab called Brandon King. So we asked him to spell his name. So he spelled his name, Brandon. Then we said, what's your favorite movie? And he said, Gone with the Wind, which he spelled perfectly. And then Melody and I said to him, well, what are you thinking about when you're moving the cursor? And he spelled out nothing. So we looked at ourselves and said, let's go home. So we went home and came back the next day and asked him what he was thinking about. And he said, and he spelled out the cursor. So now we had implanted his arm area, and this was now the cursor area. So this showed us the importance of plasticity. In other words, the brain can adapt. And that is really one of the keys to making a prosthesis. So in other words, you implant the arm area and it turns itself into the cursor area just by its effort at learning to spell. Okay, let's go to Eric. So I'm going to show you a video, and Eric is controlling phoneme da, and excuse me. So what we did with Eric is we connected the phonemes and different phonemes to single units, and so we had to control the single units to produce the phoneme. So in the video, you'll hear a big ding and then da, and that's from the computer. And then you'll hear Rick say da, da. So we hear a ding and da. So I have to get out of here because I couldn't get it to work. And just give me a moment. Coming up. No items matched with the search. Thank you very much. Okay, so computer. So you you can hear let me pop back into this. You could hear Eric say Dada. So you had the ding, you had the ding first, and then he produces. So we realized that okay, so we could use single units, but most people use patterns of firings of single units. So we said, okay, we'll do that too. So this shows some data from 39 phonemes, only 38 here. Um, accuracy, peak accuracy would be a 1. And with these phonemes, which are mainly consonants, the accuracy was pretty good, and many of them were pretty okay. So he could decode above chance, which is the blue. He could decode 23 of his 39 phonemes with just one electrode. When I did it, the same thing, it was 32 or 39. And then we said, okay, let's see if we use different machine learning languages like linear discriminant analysis, support vector machines, or fiscal discriminant analysis. And again, the three methods like here show that, well, yes, you can get more, same result, whichever method you use here and here, not so good here, not so good there, pretty good there. So whichever decoding we used, so we're very confident we could decode phonemes. So we did the same for words and phrases. But I want to show you this, which is conditioning slow firing single units. Well, actually, we did it for fast firing ones as well. Remember, I showed you in the first video um, that we implanted his hand area, but he was able to turn that into cursor area. Now, in this little study on day 1549 after implantation, we asked him to listen to the tone for 10 seconds, take a rest for 10 seconds, and then in the tone in his head for 10 seconds. Now, this is spikes per second, so this is the firing rate, and these are 10 trials. So listen, rest, sing in his head, and it's all the firing rates are all confused. So he said, well, that's not very good. Now, we didn't know, we couldn't know at the time if he was singing in his head. So I said, well, let's give him some feedback. So and the firing rate was fed back to him on day 1553, and everything improved a lot. Listen, rest, sing. And it was upside down here, and then it was nice. And that was throughout 7 trials. And then we said, okay, let's give him the feedback, but increase the volume of the feedback from the single units as he does it. And there it was really smooth over these 9 trials. And that's when I realized that, wow, conditioning is very, very powerful. Um, and this was okay. I mean, most people reject slow units, slow fine, because, well, they're too slow. Well, they're not. They work too. They can be conditioned as well as the fast firing ones. So, John Bernberg came down to us from Northeastern University in Boston, and he did a PhD. And that's Eric, and that's his dad. There's Randy, and you're going to meet Randy in a moment. That's myself. And what he did was he said, "Okay, Eric, we're going to start. We're going to have you control the cursor moving it around the screen." So I have to break out of this again. Sorry, and we see it in the middle. It starts here, and that's the target. And that's Eric doing that. Target. So, um, so if you understand, that was a form and frequency plane. In other words, there were vowel sounds. And so starting in the middle, the computer said go up here, up to the top left, and he was able to do it. He was able to go in all dimensions. So he could control it. And that was very exciting. Yes, and John did get his PhD. Uh, um, oh, okay, I'm trying to move along. Doesn't want to. Okay. So I still wasn't happy because we weren't sure that it was just as easy to decode silent speech as audible speech. And I wanted to implant electrodes and leave them in my brain for as long as possible. And then afterwards, when I die, do the histology to show that there'll be no scarring. Okay, so the paradigm was over about 74 seconds. There was continuous neural data here. There's a control period here, an audible speech here, silent speech here. And this is the microphone picking up any speech. So in the control period, I sat there just trying to think of nothing, trying to keep my brain quiet, which is very difficult. And I hit the marker 10 times. And then during audible speech, I again spoke and touched the marker, spoke, touched the marker, did that about 10 times. And a silent speech, I said the same thing silently and again touched the marker. Now, there's a difference between obviously an audible speech and silent. Silent speech is when you're trying to speak, but you're not actually. Imagined speech is you just imagine yourself speaking or imagine the words or phrases. That's different because in this area that we've implanted, you it's a very active area. It's a control area, so you need to try to speak silently without actually having any output. So, so the key thing, the key result is that there's a control period and audible, and we did correlations between audible and silent, and the p-value says there's no difference. But there was a difference between the control period and the audible or silent. If there was no difference in the control period, then the whole thing is just noise. But there is a significant difference, p less than 0.01. And that was for G. So we did that for Ch, and it was the same result. So we're very happy that it's easy to decode silent speech. So this leads us back to our implantation plan and our little figurine here. So are we ready? Almost. The electrodes are ready to implant. The amplifiers are ready. There's a Neuralink system. The spike sorting is ready. And the decoding software is almost ready, but it's not. It's going to take a few weeks or months to get that right. So the surgeon is ready. All that's teed up. And this is important. Training can be worldwide. So training does not have to be in a lab. The patient get implanted, go back for 3 months, letting the signals go in, and then we visit and start the training. And then there must be a caretaker who look after the implantation site and connect it in and turn it on. And then we can access the computer remotely. So all the training can be done remotely from our office here. And funding is required, yes. So here's the training. Before training can start, as you know, 3 months are needed for neuropil to grow in and produce stable recordings. Training will take many months. This is not plug and play. Will be a lot of work on our part, but on the patient side too. So the participant will have to be patient. Oh, how will we do this? Well, first we can train single units, or we can train patterns, and we can train guitar sounds, words, phrases, phonemes. So first, we would attach a few words like hello, how are you? Hey doc, why did you take so long to get this together? Things like that. Um, but then the real work would begin. And I think that guitar sounds or piano sounds discrete, like playing simple tunes, like When the Saints Go Marching In. There are only 5 notes involved, so you need 5 single units. And I mean, let's go back a little bit to 1973, when Fetz and Baker produced a paper showing that monkeys can be trained to fire single units and get a reward. But also they can be trained to fire one unit and suppress the other. And suppressing others is key to this, because you've got to not fire them together, you got to fire them one at a time. Well, no, if monkeys can do it, well, need I say more? So music might be a good way to train the brain, especially if people have been musicians in the past. And you know how long it takes to learn to play the piano, it takes years to play it well. But then phonemes. There are only 39 phonemes in the English language. So if you can control 39 phonemes, and not even all of them are needed to produce words or phrases, if you can control 30 to 35, then you can produce any word or phrase you can speak. So training the phonemes will be tough, but it'll be worthwhile. I want to mention that we have machine learning in our brains. We have AI. We are the best computer. Between our ears is more powerful than any other computer. So far, I mean, they're trying to make better ones, but no, we have it. So why don't we use it? We could also train single unit firing patterns, like I showed you in decoding the phonemes for Eric. And this requires extensive computing power, utilizing AI, machine learning, and all the rest of it. And that's what some people do. Like Stavisky, he and his group, they've produced, and Ed Chang, they've produced speech with a latency of in seconds. And Ed Chang told me he got it down to 1 second. But you can see with single units, it's we estimate of 150 milliseconds, maybe 200. If it's more than 200 milliseconds, then it sounds like an echo, and it doesn't sound like your speech. So the latency is super duper important. So they're the ways that we're going to train. And so, well, who are we anyway? There's me. There's Dina is the engineer, Dina Andresen. Jeff Duke is the programmer. And Keely Reid of Neuralinks is also assisting with programming. We're working on that at the moment. Then we had a partner, Daniel O'Hare, at the Microelectronics Centre in University College Cork in Ireland. He's developing implantable electronics. And we have a partner, Professor Madeleine Lowry, and her student, Sakia Prathana, is studying electrical improvements at the Bioengineering Centre at University College Dublin in Ireland. So we have 2 neurosurgeons, Dr. Cervantes and Dr. Principal here. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
That was very impressive. Thank you very much, Phil.